Hey, this is Sam. Welcome to a special episode of BNS about movies. There is every other movie in the world, and then there's the Abomination.
I think he's possessed. You open up right now or I'm gonna get the hatchet and chop this door down.
What? Suddenly, I knew what I had to do.
There's blood all over my truck.
What you got there? Feed him! He's hungry.
No hype, this movie is absolutely brain-destroying junk transmitted from some terrifying alternate timeline that I hope and pray never reaches our own. It's a world where televangelist Brother Fogg can pray a tumor out of a woman, who vomits it out, and then that tumor crawls into her son, who undergoes a transformation into a killing machine that feeds the many spores of the creature and pushes forward the end of all things. This is also the kind of movie that starts with a blast forward of all the gore you're about to see in this movie, and still not feel boring when that gore comes back. And man, does that gore come back. It takes over the world of this movie. It transforms this protagonist Corey's home into a panorama of teeth and blood and muscle and sinew and gristle and yes, more gore. And what's wrong with Texas or right? This movie feels like it wasn't released and that it escaped. Like it should have been destroyed before it infected your brain. But here it is, hiding the lo-fi menace out there, waiting for people to watch it and wonder, why are people driving so much when they aren't retching from the endless parade of blood and viscerally being thrown at the screen? And the dub soundtrack, which makes me love this movie even more, because when you put your budget into gigantic monsters that emerge from appliances and kitchen nooks, you don't have time for the cash a sync sound. Director and writer Bret McCormick also made parts of Tabloid and tons of other great movies like Time Tracers and Replicator. Even at this early stage of his career, he's showing off a real eye of how to use the budget and how to pretty much frighten you through the sheer strangeness of what he's created. This isn't the perfect movie, that said, but perfection is an ideal that cannot exist. This is the Abomination. You can get the Abomination from Visual Vengeance. I can't tell you how excited I was about this release. It has 5 hours of bonus content, a feature-length interview with Bret, never-before-seen outtakes, and behind-the-scenes footage. It is really incredible. If you're really into this movie, I recommend a few other things, and you can also get the Abomination book, which I'll have a link to get here. I'm super excited about this book because it took the review that you just heard. It's in the book. There's an expanded interview that I did with Bret. And I really feel that The Abomination is one of, if not the most interesting horror movies of the 80s. So anything I can get new folks to see it, I will. And Bret's done a lot more than just that. He's written a few books of his own. I'd like to recommend his book, Texas Schlock, B-movie, sci-fi, and horror from the Lone Star State. It's the classic examination of the history of micro-budget horror and science fiction films made in Texas. For 6 years, this book's only been available as an oversized paperback, coffee table sized book. Finally, it's available in Kindle ebook format at a price everybody can afford. You'll get to learn all about Larry Buchanan, SF Brownie Brownrigg, Tom Moore, Justin Power, Sal Hernandez, and Jacob Grimm. There's a lot of different folks stuff on this, and you can get it on Amazon. And you can still get signed paper copies of the book at texasschlock.com. There'll be a link in there so you can also find out more. You can also get the Abomination book. This gets the highest recommendation from me. I think all of Bret's movies are great, and I think that reading how they're made is even more important. Before I met him, I was really worried about it because the Abomination is just so strange. So I thought, God, the guy who made this has to be just as strange, but completely the opposite. He's a really genuine, warm-hearted human being, and I love getting a chance to tell more people about his work. Another of Bret's movies that I really love is Replicator from 1998.
When I turn the power on, a special transmitter attached to the headset will begin to send carefully calibrated radio waves, who will in turn begin to have sexual thoughts, which will then travel through the headset where it's converted to video. Any questions?
Will I get a Woody, sir? The Pentagon is spending a fortune on this project, and I want to see what we're spending it on.
X-ray specs.
Prepare for phase 2 of the operation, Doctor.
The Replicator Project?
Yes, sir! I can replicate an entire platoon of ass-kicking gung-ho Marines.
Except once they get there, they turn into bimbos!
Military establishment doesn't really have a practical use for an assault force made up of genetically altered women with large breasts.
Mom.
Funny little bastard.
When I spoke to him about this movie, I wondered, how could you come up with this? And he said, I was trying to match Roger Corman's record, 5 films in 1 year. In my case, it was Takedown, Time Tracers, Biotech Warrior, Rumble in the Streets was last, and then Replicator. I had challenged Keith Cajournes to write a script in a week. This is what he came up with. Keith was a really talented guy, funny actor, and a solid writer. He did an interesting film years later, The Devil's Tomb, with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Ron Perlman. I had absolutely nothing to do with the story other than accepting it. At the time, I thought it poked fun at the military in the same way my favorite writer, Terry Southern, had done with Dr. Strangelove. The military, by and large, is headed up by guys who like to destroy things, guys who have society's approval to be thugs. They take themselves very seriously, and I think it's a good idea to poke fun at them once in a while. It's a matter of record. I was eager to work in Roger's footsteps back then. This was my attempt to make 5 movies in a single year, and to shoot 1 in 4 days, a little shop of horrors. Shot on 3 days in 35mm at the Remington York Studios in Irving, Texas, with additional footage shot a year later on 16mm with Gunnar Hansen and Brink Stevens at Aries Productions in Arlington, Texas, to increase the runtime. Replicator starts with Dr. Goodbody, Stevens, conducting an experiment of the Sexual Hologram Interface Terminal, SHIT, that allows her to see the fantasies of Private Lebo, James Bach. We see a fantasy of his wife and her friend Buffy, as well as him getting to see Goodbody's, well, good body. Good news, Brink Stevens in the early 80s. Pay attention, what you will see the same exact footage later. This is the only time Brink appears in the movie. After this opening, the military brass gathers as Colonel Sanders, Colonel Sargent, who's Rocky Patterson, who was in Nail Gun Massacre and Rotor, and General Mills, the come to witness Dr. Oliver, who is Cajournes, the writer, who inserts himself in some exciting moments and proves that, yes, movies are awesome. And Dr. Kildare, Hansen, machine firsthand. Dr. Fields, who is played by Randy Clower from Fatal Justice, Biotech Warrior, and Time Tracers, invites himself along, hoping to witness an epic failure and gain more funding for himself. If those names don't clue you into the feel of the movie, Dr. Laurel Hardy's name will. She's TJ Myers, a former Miss Lubbock teen, Texas. The machine they get to check out is an organic digital replication double helix genetic coding scrambler in a 1680 wavelength with the maximum thrust at about 40 gig. Yes, I have that memorized. It basically turns men into women. So Dr. Oliver adds his mind control and creates a weapon for the government that sends mind-controlled women after our enemies. But the women go back through the teleporter. They turn into alligator women. Did Jess Franco steal this idea for Al Piero versus the Alligator Ladies? Also, anyone killed by an alligator turns into a zombie, sometimes a gay zombie. This film is in no way concerned without offending anybody or everybody. Replicator has some music that might seem familiar, but at least to me, maybe because I watched too many Andy Sedaris movies. The soundtrack was created by Ron DiUlo, who wrote the song Return to Savage Beach, and did the soundtracks for Sedaris' movie Day of the Warrior, The Dallas Connection, Enemy Gold, as well as Mountaintop Massacre and Honeymoon Horror. A lot of the crew also worked on an industrial movie called Risky Business, Employee Violence in the Workplace, that I really want to see, hoping it captures some of the energy of this. Replicator sounds and is ridiculous, but so what? The world is a dark and horrible place filled with apathy and soul-crushing failure. This isn't anything but. This is a movie dedicated to entertaining you in the short time that we're here, and in the short time it took to get made, and with the low budget that it had. You'll remember it long after watching a movie that cost thousands of times more than this movie. And good news, you can also get this on Blu-ray, Visual Vengeance, and even crazier, Bill Van Rim from Driving Asylum. And I did the commentary track for it. So you can hear me say, over a movie, but also get some great facts about the film. Finally, the last movie I'd like to bring up of Bret's films is Ozone, The Attack of the Redneck Mutants from 1986. And when this was made in 86, there was a really real idea that we had broken the world, or at least the ozone layer. Spoiler warning, we did. Discovered in 1913 by French physicists Charles Fabry and Henri Buisson, the ozone layer absorbs most of our ultraviolet radiation. This layer of protection for us was destroyed after years of pollution. Chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs if you heard that, or bromofluorocarbons, which means unabsorbed and dangerous ultraviolet radiation, was now hitting the world at an incredibly high intensity. You can feel the effects now when there's a bad weather quality day. It's what they call bad ozone, can harm those with respiratory illnesses, such as asthma, COPD, and emphysema. Code Orange, kids! Unite. and try to take over while you hack up your insides. I've told you all the signs to tell you in 1986 there was a hole in the ozone layer, and it seemed like it was probably going to cause zombies to wander around rural Texas. Directed by Matt Devlin, who directed and wrote Tabloid, as well as the man who wrote The Invisible Maniac, and produced Crispin Glover's What Is It?, which quite frankly blows my mind. Ozone Attack the Redneck Mutants is the movie brave enough to answer the call to make an ozone-related mutant zombie epic shot on 8mm. The spiritual cousin, or in the same family as The Abomination, which has some of the same cast and crew, as it was shot first and this came next. This all starts with Kevin Muncie, who was Cody from The Abomination. Get ready for me saying from The Abomination a lot. Sneaking into the trunk of a car of Arlene Wells, Blue Thompson, a.k.a. Carolyn McCormick, a.k.a. Bret's wife at the time. Of course, she was in the movie. She plays Kelly. She also edited his movies Blood on the Badge and Armed for Action, as well as acting as a costume designer for Bret's Time Tracers. They're on their way to Poolville, Texas, an incorporated community of around 500 people in North Texas, close to the birthplace of Robert E. Howard, Paster, Texas, and Matt Martin, as well as a final resting place of Peter Mayhew, the man we know as Chewbacca, who died in Boyd, Texas. Anyway, Poolville is at the junction of Farm Roads 3107 and 920, named for the big pool of water in the middle of the town. There are 5 churches, one for every 100 people. But back to Ozone. Get ready to meet characters with names like Outhouse Mutant, Car Mutant, Country Store Mutant, Granny Mutant, Big Fat Mutant, and Melon Mutant. There are so many melons in this movie. This movie cares about watermelons more than Mr. Majestic with Charles Bronson. It also has effects that make me generally concerned for the actors, as the effects look like less practical effects and more tar and feathering. I can only imagine that the zombie makeup stayed on their skin for days, and that throwing up all the multicolored liquids gave them all diarrhea. Bret has somewhat confirmed this by telling me that a lot of people had makeup on their skin for a long time after this was finished. There's also some kind of misplaced love story because Wade McCoy has promised to pick up Loretta Lipscomb from the general store. We also meet his mother, Ruby, who at one point invites Kevin and Arlene to a picnic party that turns into chaos. Loretta Lipscomb is Ashley Nevada, a.k.a. Barbara Dow, who was also in The Invisible Maniac, Matt at the Moon, Death Row Game Show, Curse of the Queer Wolf, Nudist Colony of the Dead, Witchcraft 4. And they said that Roman numerals wouldn't be important when I grew up. Cage 2, Red Lipstick, and G.I. Jesus. I asked Bret about this movie, and he filled in a lot of the gaps. He said, we agreed to do these 2 movies back to back. It was supposed to be like a month-long thing with 10 days on each movie. The director of this film was supposed to go first, and at the last minute, he backed off and bailed out. So went in and shot The Abomination first. We shot for 10 days, and that was kind of it. Ozone went on for like 22 days, and it got to the point where we just had to say it's time to stop because it could have gone on forever. I wondered how could he shoot wherever he wanted and not be bothered, and he said in Poolville back in those days, you could shoot a scene on the dirt roads, run through town, and be out in the street for 40 minutes before a car came by. We were largely undisturbed with pretty much anything we wanted to do there. The locals, some of them were curious, and they helped out. Some even have big parts in the movie. This is the kind of movie where puke and blood get on everything. That's how they do it in Texas. The kind of place where Chainsaw Massacre gets filmed in a way too hot shack with real animal guts. And the sequel was made in a newspaper printing facility that had ink pouring down its walls, and everyone got a mysterious respiratory illness. This movie feels homemade and not perfect, and to me, that's how movies should be. Messy affairs that make you laugh or puke, or sometimes both at the same time and it comes out your nose. The score is great too. It's by Richard Davis, who worked on Dear God No, Amazon Hotbox, Monsters, and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. What a career. John Hudak, Laszlo Muir, and Kim Davis, who worked as a location manager on movies like Alita, Battle Angel, Stone Cold, Prom Child, Ollie Hop Noodles, Haven of Bliss, that's a Christmas Story sequel, and Don Henley's video for The End of the Innocents, where The Abomination is a film where darkness within the light of religion and literal cancer come to life as a biblical end times beast happens. Ozone is happier to just be people hooting and hollering, shotgun blasting melons a bit, and an ending that's beyond deserved for its characters. Anyways, that's a lot on the films of Bret McCormick. Again, a reminder, to go to Amazon, buy his books, The Abomination book and Texas Schlock. You can find out more from him at BAMArt.studio, BAM Art Studio. And you can find out more about Texas Schlock with the links that are posted here. Thanks for listening to this special episode. See you soon.